Star Wars: The Last Jedi, the 8th episodic movie in the Star Wars series and the 10th movie overall. It really is an interesting film, and I actually have a lot to say about it. Now, if you remember when the 7th episode, The Force Awakens, came out, it seemed like everybody loved it, and it was to the point where a lot of people were saying that it was the best Star Wars movie ever, which I actually didn't agree with. I liked it a lot. I think it was great, but I actually expected people to be mad at me when I did my review when I said no, it wasn't the best one ever. But actually, then the backlash hit the film. And it's things like that that made me lose interest in Star Wars for a long time, because all of a sudden everybody was talking about how bad The Force Awakens was. When it came out, nobody was saying that, but, well, you know how it is. That's the fandom. They're fickle and they're impossible to please. They want more, but they are never, ever satisfied, even when given exactly what they ask for. And looking at Rotten Tomatoes for The Last Jedi, it seems that not much has changed. Right now, Star Wars: The Last Jedi on Rotten Tomatoes has a certified fresh critic rating of 93%, which is very, very good. But the user rating is pretty low. It's at 56%, which, by the way, that's lower than Justice League. Justice League had a user score of 79%, but a 40% from critics. So this time it's controversial because it's so different, apparently, when the fans bitched about The Force Awakens was too similar to the originals. What is it that they want? After all the prequel backlash and criticism, it would be hard to think that what Star Wars fans wanted was the original trilogy rehashed, since that seems to be all they talk about, but that didn't work for the fans, and I've come to the conclusion that the issue with the Star Wars fandom is that they refuse to let go of the past. Like, for example, the original theatrical cuts of the original trilogy. I mean, I'm not saying that every change made to the special editions was good, and I'm not saying that every change made to the special editions was bad. Some were good, some were bad, but at the same time, they're still basically the same goddamn movies. So when faced with a fandom that can't let go of the past, the shade is real with The Last Jedi. The central theme of this film is that you have to do just that. You have to let go of the past. And for such a long movie, it has a rather simple plot. The remaining Resistance fighters are on the run from the First Order. First, their base is attacked, and they barely escape. Poe Dameron defies orders to retreat, and instead goes through with a risky mission to destroy a First Order dreadnought, but they experience heavy losses. They escape and jump to hyperspace, but somehow the First Order fleet, led by Supreme Leader Snoke's own ship, is tracking them, something thought to have been impossible. Outnumbered and outmatched, Leia, Akbar, Poe, Finn, and newcomers Rose and Holdo must attempt to escape by simply running away and keeping just out of range of the fleet. They start to run dangerously low on fuel. This is the bulk of the movie, but there are two other side plots going on. The first involves Poe leading a mutiny against Holdo, believing her plan to be cowardly. Instead, he strikes out with his own plan to disable the First Order's tracking device, which involves seeking out a master codebreaker at a casino. The other subplot has to do with Rey, who in the previous film found Luke Skywalker, and her attempts to convince him to train her and to return to lead the Resistance as a symbol of hope. Rey also has a psychic connection now with Kylo Ren, who is feeling his own conflict. Rey begins to believe that she can turn Kylo to the Resistance's side, while he believes that he can get her to join him. And if that part sounds a little familiar, this is the part that does echo the original trilogy a bit. With The Force Awakens being so very much an echo of the original Star Wars, both in aesthetics and plot, a lot of people assumed that The Last Jedi would echo Empire Strikes Back. But in a lot of ways it doesn't, and rather it echoes Return of the Jedi, though in a less obvious and more abstract way. The one big tip-off being the parallel between Rey and Kylo's struggle and Luke and Vader's struggle to turn each other. There's even a similar arc that Rey goes through. At first she's disgusted by Kylo, but eventually a relationship blossoms of begrudging respect. They're not related by blood like Luke and Vader were, but they both see a lot of themselves in the other, and they clearly want to be on the same side. The other way in which the film reminded me of Episode 6 is simply that it doesn't feel like the middle part of a trilogy. It feels very much like a conclusion, though with the ending, of course, leaving a lot still in the air. So how is it? Well, for one, aesthetically speaking, this is easily the best-looking Star Wars movie ever. The effects are great, of course, but The film really shines as the set design, the cinematography, and the use of color. The acting is also very good, with Mark Hamill's old and grumpy Luke Skywalker mostly stealing the show, but perhaps the biggest triumph that The Last Jedi gives us is its theme, which I mentioned is letting go of the past, something that various characters need to learn to do. Luke waxes poetic about the failings of the Jedi and how, through their dogmatic teachings and hubris, they were instrumental in the downfall of the Republic. But his problem is that he wants the entire thing to fade away rather than learn from the mistakes and change. Luke, to me, represents the old-school Star Wars fan that thinks that only the original 3 movies are valid, and then only the theatrical cuts, and due to not liking what came after, wants the series to just stop as they feel the originals are impossible to live up to. Kylo Ren is diametrically opposed to Luke. He wants to destroy the past and start fresh, but due to his hatred of everything that came before, he won't learn from the mistakes made and will only repeat them, despite wanting to destroy it. To me, Kylo Ren represents George Lucas, who was never satisfied with his films and wants to always tweak and alter them, and seemingly fails to see the validity in love that came before. To me, The Last Jedi isn't simply a film, but a parable for the cultural phenomenon that Star Wars has become, and a deep character study, not only of the characters and archetypes present within the film, but the people who grew up with it and the new fans alike. If I had to say one thing, it's that overall, The Force Awakens was more fun, but it was also more obvious in its attempts to elicit that response. The Last Jedi has its fun moments, but it's lighter on the laughs, it's harsh on its own audience, and it's willing to make controversial and harsh decisions to prove a point. And I agree with that point. While we can't dwell on the past, we should respect it and learn from it. The Last Jedi is not only great, but it retroactively cements The Force Awakens as also being great, as all the choices made there, the Force nostalgia, the manipulative shots, the score, it all makes sense in hindsight, as it was clear that the plan was to strike the series in a bold and to some frightening new direction. But before that, they gave us one last familiar hurrah. Only time will tell whether I'll wind up preferring The Last Jedi over, let's say, The Empire Strikes Back. But now, having seen the former only once and the latter many, many times, I can't make that judgment. But I can say that this is the best film in the series since Empire. If you find yourself angry at this film, I have to insist that it isn't because it's badly made, because it very much isn't. But maybe it's time to let go of certain things. I give Star Wars The Last Jedi a 10 out of 10.